Look, you invited me to Orlando. You said, we'll kick off season 16. We'll be in the pool. We'll go for a swim. We'll talk about what to do for season 16. And then this?
Yeah, we're kind of having our regularly scheduled afternoon thunder shower. Welcome to sunny Florida, Frank. What can I say?
I swear, we just can't catch a break. It reminds me of that road trip I took last year, the Leaders of the Pack weekend there.
That's right, in October.
From Grove City to Carnegie Mellon, and nothing but rain, and then being on the sideline for the Westminster Carnegie Mellon game, all rain.
Yeah. Well, rain and the elements sometimes are part of the game. We've been at this for season 16?
Season 16, 15 years come the end of September, yep.
Wow.
And let's just face it, if you need rain where you live, just call us. We'll come on out and bring you some rain. That's the way it works here.
Yeah.
But look, we got a preseason show to do. We're in the new digs here for JB. And so let's get it started. You're watching season 16 of In the Huddle, celebrating 15 years. Okay, so it's raining, so we're going to do the show inside. Why not? And it is Winter Park, Florida here. This kitchen may look a lot like JB's old kitchen to the untrained eye, but right now we're going to say hi to the wide shot, and you can see the nice patio door looking at the swimming pool. Still getting rained on out there a little bit, it looks like.
Yep.
And so coming back to our near shot here, JB, why the move? I mean, was there a restraining order involved? Were you trying to hide from me? What was going on exactly?
The number 4, Frank. We've got 4 kids going to be off at college this fall. And so it's now down to Jen and I, our little buddy over there, Ellie, who's looking at us, and my son, who's a junior in high school. So we did a little downsize. Just moved across the street here in Winter Park. We love this new neighborhood that we're in. And yeah, I think part of the reason why we fell in love with this house is it kind of reminded us of the old one. And so here we are and getting into the next phase, as it were. We're almost empty nesters, but not quite.
Okay, so you've got that going. I've got a new hairstyle. I'm no longer flipping the front thanks to our St. Baldrick's event in Balsa Spa in Saratoga.
That was nice.
It's tough to grow the hair back once you get rid of it, so there's that at least. But beyond that, 15 years, we haven't changed that much except for the fact we went to video at a certain point, and we got a better, more handsome co-host, according to Eric Wren at least.
That's nice of him to say.
Saw him this summer at the Saratoga County Fair. Good to see him and his family doing well, and we'll catch up with him again, I'm sure, before the season's out to talk about 15 years. It's a lot of things to talk about here. This is not our only preseason show. More on that later. But we got to look back first because we kind of left you high and dry at the end of last season. Last you saw me, I was in some kind of golden outfit and talking to players of North Central who won Stag Bowl 49 by the final score of 28-21 over Mount Union. The game got close toward the end, but if you took the first 3 quarters of the game, it really wasn't even that close. Yeah, a little bit. Well, but it woke up in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, it did. No, it got very interesting at the end, and you have to give Mount Union credit. They battled, and they had a chance there with a few minutes left, I think, to try to tie the game and maybe send it to overtime. But just too much offense from North Central. Ethan Greenfield, the Gagliardi Trophy winner, receiving, rushing touchdown. They had that 94-yard touchdown to Hardy, which was amazing. So yeah, congrats to the champs, and we'll see if they can defend the title.
Luke Layden back, Ethan Greenfield not, and several others are not as well. D'Angelo Hardy is, and so that is one of the reasons why they're going to be talked about as our number 1 a little bit here, or 1 with emojis according to certain fans. I thought that 1 wasn't enough or something. But number 1 North Central is still on our preseason ballot. A lot more about that in a moment.
Yeah.
But in 2022, we didn't name our players of the year, really. Nope. And so you're going to give you the opportunity to kind of give the input here as to who we did pick and why. First on offense, Wayne Ruby Jr. of Mount Union.
Yeah, 30 receiving touchdowns, led the nation. And I will always say this with an asterisk, I guess, to a certain point. These players we picked specifically because they weren't picked by other publications as players of the year. We like to spread the wealth around. We could have easily gone with some of those other choices, and they were great choices, obviously. But I feel like Wayne Ruby Jr. was a real difference maker. He's back, and he's definitely a big reason, along with Braxton Plunk, why Mount Union is expected to maybe return to the Stag Bowl in 23.
Well, Wayne Ruby Jr. Will have a lot to say about what happens here. I think, indeed, with Braxton Plunk, that's one reason they'll be number 2 when we get to it in a little bit.
Yep.
But with the definite possibility of being number 1 very easily if something slips up, not even a loss, but let's say consistency as the season goes on. Not that we re-rank them ourselves, but D3Football.com obviously ranks weekly, and I have a ballot in there. Mm-hmm. Also, for defense, Luke Sherman of Johns Hopkins is our Defensive Player of the Year. Tell folks why.
He was just a force to be reckoned with. I think he had like 15 sacks last season, about the same number of tackles for loss, was just always in the backfield kind of wreaking havoc. And once again, he is back, which is a number 1 reason I think that Hopkins is expected to potentially repeat for the Centennial title.
Special Teams Player of the Year?
No surprise here. Kristen Nutra from Springfield was probably, I think, the most statistically accurate, had the most field goals, I think, in Division III. D3Football.com agreed, named him first team preseason All-American, so no surprise there. Just a reliable kicker for that Springfield Pride team who's looking to go back to the playoffs once again and win the NEWMAC along the way.
Without Catholic in the NEWMAC, it makes things interesting. They're in the landmark now, so we'll see where that goes. A lot more on that as the season continues here. Ryan Larson is our Coach of the Year for 2022, and Carnegie Mellon obviously has a lot to say thank you to him for, based on his consistency at the helm. The last couple of years, just think about what they've been able to accomplish under his guidance.
Well, if you watch their games last year, Carnegie Mellon played close with a lot of teams. Certain teams that maybe they should have blown out, they played close with. They barely beat Washington and Jefferson on kind of a fluky defensive touchdown. They played North Central better than Mount Union did for about 2 or 3 quarters in their quarterfinals matchups. And I think a lot of people forgot about how strong of a game that Tartan team played. A lot of other national fans usually think that an East Region team is going to go in and get killed. And sometimes that happens, and there's a history of that. But in this game, the Tartans gave the Cardinals probably their second best, maybe even best game of the season, arguably. They had more points than Mount Union did for the first half, so there's that. But I thought, the way he got his guys to find ways to win, the way they schemed to keep themselves in these close games really said a lot. And so congrats to him, and we'll look forward to seeing what he's got for his next trick here.
Yeah, and for those that are saying, well, he was only a coach for 1 season, I know that, folks, but he got that consistency to continue. That's tough for new head coaches to do in their first year. And so the old guard and the new guard at Carnegie Mellon, very successful in making that work. So, okay, about a week and a half ago, whenever this gets to air here, we decided, hey, we're going to put out our top 25 for preseason. I'm sure nothing could go wrong. Everybody will love this. And a lot of you did love it, in fact.
Oh, yeah. We got some really great feedback.
Oh, yeah. No, we did get a lot of viewership, a lot of shares, a lot of whatnot on whatever they call that stuff now on X versus Twitter, whatever it's called there.
Yeah.
But we wanted to take a look at why are we ranking teams in certain places. You want a little bit more information about that? We said tune into our preseason show. We'll give you just that, more information. So here we are. Looking at number 1 and number 2, I think we've already hit on that already. Number 3, Wartburg. Realistically, they bring back a lot of that team that nearly did in Mount Union in the semifinals last year.
Yeah, like I said in our semifinals show, I really felt that Wartburg let that game get away from them. They almost scored too quickly. If you give Braxton Plunk and Wayne Ruby 3 minutes, that I really thought that the Knights had that one, but they just scored a little too soon. And that defense, led by Owen Grover and company, they're back, and we'll have to see if they can. They didn't make that last stop that they needed. Maybe this is the year that they get over the hump.
Then St. John's, kind of that consistent MIAC team that's just always knocking on the door there.
Well, I want to jump in real quick here because our 4, 5, and 6, Tio, they were so close. We actually had to institute sort of like a tiebreaker mechanism, and
True.
That's kind of why St. John's was sort of bumped up a little bit because of their track record historically. There might have been some other, fancy mathematics going on. Not really.
Well, no tie there. 5 and 6 did have a tie.
Okay,
We'll talk about in a second here. But again, consistency for St. John's in an era in D3 where consistency may be starting to wane for certain teams ever since COVID started happening. And we'll talk maybe a little bit more about that either later in this show or another show, I'm sure. But there was a tie between Trinity and UMHB for us, and a lot of you were pointing out whether or not you like the fact that Trinity ends up ranked above UMHB in ours. Mm-hmm. Our tiebreaker was the team that had the least variance in between our two scorings of them, which means that they're the closest together on our ballots, because that shows more confidence in a certain zone of that team, and that's why we use less variance as the tiebreaker. Trinity was that team out of these two that was the lesser variance team. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like 3 Texas teams, 1, 2, 3 right there, 5, 6, 7 technically. Trinity, then UMHB, then Hardin-Simmons. And the nice thing is there are some matchups in between these two teams, or these 3 teams, this season, with Trinity and UMHB going first in week 2. Hardin-Simmons against UMHB later in the season, and who knows what could happen maybe in the playoffs if we get down to it. So these teams will have a chance to prove themselves ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. There will be a bit of a round robin and a stack ranking that will kind of come from that. A lot of these teams, I think actually all 3 are playing teams out of region, kind of going to some pretty huge games in the first couple weeks of the season. So we'll know pretty much early on where these programs are really going to sort of end up. But all 3 of them, once again, kind of coming into the season with a lot of expectations. The Crusaders, however, when I look at that roster, I don't see a lot of familiar names. I recognize a couple, like Ethan Ruckman, but the Kyle Kings and the Brandon Jordans and all that. KJ Miller, all those stars from many years past have graduated and moved on to bigger and better things. So we'll see, can the crew reload?
They often can.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to go to a Division III football school in Texas, that's going to be the first place you look.
Yeah.
I mean, still to this day, no matter what. And if you're transferring from Division I to Division III in Texas, that's going to be your number 1 choice probably too in many cases. It's just the way it's turned out. So that's why they do reload so well. Mm-hmm. But can they get it to really click as early as they need to? Because look at that start schedule that they have.
Yeah, it's pretty loaded. They're definitely testing themselves like they did last season, so we'll have to wait and see.
Then we have Carnegie Mellon. Now, Carnegie Mellon number 8 is going to be a little deceiving because there is no out-of-conference schedule for PAC teams this season, and that's to their detriment for a team like Carnegie Mellon. It's disappointing, to say the least, that we're not going to get to measure them against teams that might not be PAC teams or that aren't PAC teams that might be of a certain quality. Like some of these others that we've mentioned have gone out and taken that reach. They can't even do that because the conference situation won't allow them to do that right now. So Carnegie Mellon at number 8, that might be the highest they can get in some ways if people start to ding them about what their schedule looks like this season and how they do against that schedule.
Well, I think other voters did ding them. I mean, in other polls, they're not as high. I mean, like I said before, I think I gave them a little extra credit for how well they played the national champions in the playoffs, the fact that they're returning a vast majority of that offense and defense. I think Ben Mills, their quarterback, is only going to play better in his second or maybe even third year at this point. And so I know that their defense was good enough to hang with the national champions. Can the offense pick it up? We'll see.
Whitewater at number 9, it doesn't surprise many people. They've got some players back, some players to fill in the gaps, but obviously a new head coach here as Kevin Bullis steps down at the end of last year. And so we'll see where that goes. A lot more on them, I'm sure, throughout the season. Linfield, number 10. They've got some holes to fill, but Blake Eaton is not one of them at quarterback. And
that's a big get.
It is, and so we'll see where they go this season. A new retooled O-line with 4 new starters for sure is going to be tough to replace in their situation. Ithaca at number 11, a lot of players back, A.J. Wingfield being one of them, their quarterback. And what do you think they learned from that North Central quarterfinal game last year where they kind of got blown out in that game? But throughout the season, they just seemed to take punches and respond back until that game. What do you think they gain from having that game under their belt now?
Well, I think they realize if to sort of take that next step to moving past a quarterfinal level game or a semifinal kind of situation, you really have to be able to be real physical up front and give a player like Wingfield some time to throw the ball. I mean, there aren't too many defensive lines that you're going to see or anywhere in the country like North Central's, but guys like Gilbert and others have graduated, and so or Gilroy, sorry. So they maybe there's a little bit of a drop off there, but I doubt it. I think it'll just motivate the Bombers both on the offensive and defensive lines to really sort of step up their physicality, and they know now like what it's going to take to play with the best.
Number 12, UW River, easy for me to say, UW River Falls. And we might want to get used to saying that this season. They lost their 4 games last season by 7 points or less. And that's against teams like St. John's and Whitewater. They beat Oshkosh last season. This is a team that brings almost everybody back on both sides of the ball.
I think they have like 10 out of 11 offensive starters back.
I mean, that's huge, and that's not normal for a lot of these teams we're talking about on this list. And so people are a little surprised to see that as our number 2 WEAC team, but also that they're number 12 in that number 2 spot, essentially. I think we stand by this right now based on what we're seeing on who's back, who's not in certain key WEAC teams.
Yeah, and apologies to the Culver's Isthmus Bowl, who I know the Falcons have been multiple champions, but this might be the year where they punch their ticket to the playoffs. There won't be many Pool C bids available, so it's going to be Pool A or bust for pretty much all the country. But a conference like the WEAC will probably get a second team in, most likely. If the Riverhawks can't beat Whitewater and win the WEAC, or Oshkosh or whomever, maybe they can still get into the playoffs regardless. So we'll see. 13
Bethel, Jaron Rosti not being there hurts their numbers, but we'll see where they go with George Bolt possibly being the new starter. 14 Del Val, Louis Barrios is back, but the Nobiles are gone. Yusuf Aladinov is gone, and so they've got some holes to fill, but they're another team that seems to be able to retool all the time based on their system and being able to get new recruits in. 15 Cortland,
who's playing the Aggies in week 1.
Exactly.
How convenient.
New turf, new video board over there, and same style, same. Really, with Boyes as quarterback and a whole litany of players back for them, this could be a very good year for Cortland.
Yeah, and I think the Dragons probably have a little chip on their shoulder. I mean, even though they had to go on the road to Randolph-Macon in the playoffs, I think they expected to win that game, and to come up a little short might have kind of stuck in their craw in the offseason. So I think we're going to find a very motivated team here, and I'm sure Coach Fitch is lighting a fire under his Dragons to take it up a notch in 23.
Lighting a fire under his Dragons. Well done there. Hey. He'll be here all week. Salisbury, number 16, they got to stay healthy, but they had a lot of depth to get to the playoffs last year in the first place, so that means they've got experience in key roles throughout their team. Number 17, the aforementioned Randolph-Macon. Can Drew Campanelli stay healthy, because that was their bugaboo in the playoffs most likely when he wasn't able to play. They sort of kind of hiccuped in that situation, but we'll see where they can go. 18, John Carroll. It's Jeff Berriman's era now at John Carroll. And, we had doubts about him maybe going into Union when he did, and he just made that program hum early and often. He's got a very good nucleus already there at John Carroll. So I'm guessing, aside from the fact they're going to start with Whitewater, he can do the same thing in keeping things moving positively for John Carroll.
Yeah, and he inherits a veteran team, I think, so that certainly helps. But, at the end of the day, it is a tough draw in week 1 to have to play a team the caliber of Whitewater. But, hey, you never know. Stranger things have happened, and we don't really know what's going on with the Warhawks as far as their personnel. They don't have a lot of guys coming back, but like we said before, they might reload, and so we'll have to wait and see. 19 was Wheaton, and Giovanni Weeks is the good news. The bad news is a lot of people to fill in alongside Weeks and on the other side of the ball as well. But, this is another team that seems to be able to reload. The Little Brass Bell game is in that really prime early spot around the 30th, I believe, of September against North Central. It's at Wheaton this year. If there's ever a year, we'll talk more about that in a little bit.
Aurora at number 20, yeah, they lose a lot, but we've said that before, and look what happened last year. Whitewater will tell you it was not exactly a walk of the park because they did not survive Aurora in that week 1 of the playoffs matchup, round 1 matchup, I should say. 21, Johns Hopkins with no Ryan Stevens. You might think, what are they going to do? But remember, David Tamero left. Stevens fills in very well. Stevens leaves. Next man up, I think, at Johns Hopkins.
Yeah, you said this off the air. National roster. I mean, Hopkins can recruit from anywhere. If you've seen any of their social media, they have a lot of these alums that are the CEOs of all these different companies. They're working on Wall Street. They're doing all this stuff. They're running hospitals. I mean, they have this cachet that's always going to help them in recruiting. And so, yeah, I think Hopkins is definitely going to be a team we'll keep an eye on.
22, Alma, and
the Scots.
Yes, the defending MIAA champs. I'm not going to even try to do my best Craig Ferguson here, but 5-5 leading to 10-0 in the regular seasons for the last 2 years should tell you a lot about that team. Obviously, some changes coming here for them this season, but you can't overlook the fact that they could turn around like that last year. You got to give them a little bit of credit here coming into 2023.
Yeah, other than the fact that the coach was still wearing a kilt when it was like December or something. I mean, but yeah, a 5-5 to 10-0. I mean, I can't think of a recent turnaround like that in a while. That's an incredible job, and so yeah, credit the Scots. We'll see if they can run it back in 23.
You are very high on UW Oshkosh, number 23 for us. Kobe Berghammer coming back here.
I think he's the best quarterback in the conference. Until we see who trots out for Whitewater, I think that QB and that receiving core that he has is really talented. Coach Jennings is on his way to build. I mean, he came from Whitewater. He knows the formula for success. Maybe this is the year that they get back to that Stag Bowl. Potentially.
For those with quarterbacks that are named Berghammer that want to complain, please send your cards and letters to James Baker. That's Baker with a B-A-K-E-R. But no, you're not wrong that he is an excellent quarterback, and the experience is going to count for something, no doubt. 24, Muhlenberg. Joe Rapetti is why, pretty much. He was a quarterback that showed a lot of moxie last year in a year that we thought might be a little bit weird for Muhlenberg, and it was. But to now have a little bit of consistency at that key position might give them the opportunity in the new Centennial Conference to get a good footing before they play some of those teams like Ursinus and Johns Hopkins.
Yeah, they just have to get over this Ursinus bear bug that's bitten them the last couple of seasons. The Mules have the personnel to do something interesting this season. We'll have to wait and see what Nate Milne has in his coaching playbook here. 25, Washington and Jefferson. Always tough to pick these teams toward the bottom of this list because there's so many that should be in this list or could be in this list. For sure.
But W&J's got a lot of players back. Not the least of which I should say, not the least of which is Jacob Hugh. But to have the established starter, again, the pack situation may not allow them for much rise this season. We'll see what happens, but they could get a lot of rise if they're able to beat Carnegie Mellon later in the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that will be the opportunity, and they had Carnegie Mellon's number there for a little bit until the end of the game last year. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I don't know if there's sort of like a Super Bowl blowover effect for Coach Sirianni and the presidents with maybe recruiting or what have you. Maybe there's some new talent coming into town. But I think Jacob Pugh, who actually came into that Carnegie Mellon game, it's really sort of his first substantial amount of action, and then from there he kind of took them on a lot of wins. So they beat John Carroll last season, so they can play in this top 25 kind of era. We'll see how it goes later this year.
Would love to see that game though in week 1 again, and that's why John Carroll has to go and schedule Whitewater instead this go around, because they lost what seemed to be a good pairing for them early in the season that way. So that's that. So you might be wondering, where's Susquehanna? Where's La Crosse? There are some other teams, obviously, you can name. RPI probably saying, where are we? There's probably a good 7 or 8 teams we could probably say, where are they in that stuff. But, okay, the most controversial, that is not on our list, is La Crosse.
Yeah.
We both took a real hard look at this as we were putting together our numbers on this, and they bring back basically a couple percent of their yards. It's not much.
2 offensive starters, maybe 4 defensive players that started last season.
And lacrosse is not a team that you can just say year to year retools. And so it's tough to have the faith level in this situation. Okay, we give Alma a little bit of credit because we see certain continuity in their roster coming back this year, and they'll prove themselves probably early whether or not that they're deserving of it. But lacrosse, I just don't know. I mean, again, come week 5, we'll find out probably.
Well, we might even find out in week 2 when they play Hardin Simmons.
That's true.
So, I mean, I think also it's too, the WEAC is so competitive, and I know that there are people out there that said, like, 6 teams should be in the top 25 from the WEAC because if we played these guys, we beat them. Blah, blah, blah. But when you compare sort of like things, I mean, there's only going to be 1 or 2 teams that make the playoffs from each conference. Pretty much this year, it's only going to be 1. The WEAC might be the exception there. So, I mean, there's multiple teams on their schedule that can beat this team. They could win too, but...
No offense to the WEAC, and you deserve all the kudos and stuff you get, but a NAC team beat you in the playoffs last year.
True.
And so is that gap between the WEAC and other teams out in Region 6, Region 5, essentially mainly Region 6 in this, starting to close in some way, thanks again to COVID. And perhaps to the 5th-year senior effect. So I guess we will talk about it briefly here.
Yeah.
The 5th-year senior effect does create unnatural gaps for us when we look at a roster that's got all noobs on it, basically, and then a bunch of 5th-year seniors on another roster. You got to give credit to the 5th-year roster team.
Yeah.
We got 2 more seasons of that, basically 1 full year, 2 seasons of it, to have this phenomenon continue to play out because of COVID.
Yep.
But it means something. It does mean something. We're learning year to year just how much it means.
Yeah, especially when you think about, a 22 or 23-year-old young man versus an 18 or 17-year-old kid. I mean, there's a huge difference. And some of these rosters that have, exploded because, we have like 150, 60 something man rosters now, which in Division III, certain schools have been able to pull that off, but it's becoming even more common in places like the East region where typically like 100 was a lot for a roster. Now you see 125, 130, 150. It's a different day, but it's coming to an end at least soon.
Well, we'll see how it plays out in that respect. RPI, again, a lot of player changeover over there. Susquehanna, you lose a lot of players on your offense. And
quarterback.
Yep. So Michael Roosh being the really strong suited quarterback for them, then how do you replace him very easily?
Is our guy Sal Garani graduated?
I think he did, yeah.
Oh, yeah. We'll have to get to this later, but I think Frank has some comments about tailgate parties that he went to, and I'm pretty sure that the Garanis know how to throw down. So more on that in a little bit.
Maybe, or even if it's not today, we'll get to another time for sure. But let's take a look at teams in each region. Yep. 1 team in each region, maybe a couple where you waffle a little bit. We'll see.
I like
where
to
we
waffle. Yeah.
But hey, you have a new Japanese waffle place down the street.
That's right.
So there you go.
Wafu.
Wafu, yes, it is. The donuts were excellent, by the way. Thanks for
Dochi.
the added weight. I've already the season hasn't even started. I'm eating my way through Division 3 somehow.
Yes, indeed.
Region 1, we're going to start with JB on all these.
Yeah, well, one of the teams I like is kind of no surprise is Endicott. because they're actually taking on, and I don't know if this has ever happened. We've been fans of D3 for a while.
A few days.
Ithaca in week 2, Hardin Simmons in week 4. I don't ever remember a New England team taking on 2 top 10 opponents in September ever.
No, Curry would have been the only one I could think of back when. That's not a true statement for them.
That just sort of jumps out at me. There's other conferences like the MASCAC. I'm going to maybe try to get over to Bridgewater State when I'm up in Massachusetts next week, dropping one of the kids off at college.
Thanks for warning everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, will this be out before? Anyway.
Yeah, it should be. Let's hope. Anyway, so Endicott is yours. Salve Regina is mine, and interestingly, they're not in the same conference right now.
Yeah, right.
It's a new MAC start for Salve Regina, and with things retooling in this conference, I'm thinking Salve Regina might be a team that could come in and start smashing mouth pretty early on this the whole conference realignment situation for them. So I'm going to go with Salve Regina as the team to watch here that could really make a difference or surprise folks along the way. Region 2, which you have dubbed as the land of realignment. I kind of like that.
It is.
And you were all right. I mean, look at all the things going on, especially the landmark conference and what that's done as a kind of knock down the dominoes effect here. We talked a little bit about them a bit ago, but your team is W&J in this one.
Yeah, I've liked them for a while, based on how they played Carnegie Mellon. I mentioned it when I was on the D1 Rejects podcast that, the way they handled Hobart in the ECAC bowl game was impressive. I think Jacob Hugh is the real deal. Coach Sirianni, I think, is going into his 20th season, is established, great D3 football coach. So, yeah, I like the Presidents. I don't know. It feels like this might be a year to shake things up for them.
Was it the Kobe Manzo name check?
The Manzo.
Manzo name check?
Manzo. We'll be wearing one of his shirts on future episodes.
There you go.
Thanks, buddy.
Cross promotion.
That's right.
When I get back, I'll send that out to him, too, for one of these polos. Anyway, not one we've worn, though, because that'd be gross. My team here, Salisbury. Again, if they can stay relatively healthy, and I know the triple option or the version of it they run is an injury-prone scenario for them on offense, but they can really surprise teams out there, I think. I don't know if it's even a surprise anymore. Without Wesley in the NJAC, or at least whatever conference they were playing in historically, they seem to have just ruled the roost in this whole thing. I know, seagulls. Don't even go there. But Salisbury, that's my team here in Region 2. Region 3, have you landed on a team yet? Because you were all over the place. My notes here have about 14 different teams listed for you.
Well, I mean, I'll start off with an easy one just because I mentioned it on the D1 Reject show. But, is this the year that Hardin Simmons can take control of the ASC? Everyone
good luck here, JB.
Everyone is taken off. I mean, I think there's only 4 teams left. They're going up to Endicott to play games because no one wants to play them. I like Belhaven in the USA South potentially. I know Huntington sort of had a death squeeze on that one for a while, and I'm sure the conference still will run through Alabama. But those would be some of the schools that sort of jump out to me.
Okay, so if you had to pick one, if I said one right now, who are you picking as the team to watch for Region 3?
Belhaven Blazers.
Ooh, hello. Okay, I can't complain about that. I'm going to pick Howard Payne. We had some folks a little bit upset. Where's Howard Payne in this list? And honestly, Landon McKinney and company, I think, can actually do some learning from the past missteps in the bigger games. I mean, this is a team that can run the table with their existing schedule. We know that. But for a couple teams named Hardin Simmons and Mary Hardin Baylor, unfortunately for them. Yeah. But this could be a year where those two teams are focusing on so many other things right now. Yep. September 30th, a big game between Howard Payne and Hardin Simmons. Yeah, they will get to show right out of the box this go around, unlike last year, whether or not they belong in the conversation.
Yeah, and they always play everybody tough, and I'm actually really interested. I think one of the more kind of under the radar Week 1 games, and we'll talk about as we get closer to our Week 1 preview. Howard Payne is playing George Fox of Oregon. Like, what a random matchup that is.
Yep. So George Fox has shown a willingness to play some out-of-bounds games, let's call it, for regional purposes. And kudos to them for that. Hopefully they're learning from that. But at the end of the day, it will show us a lot about the teams in both George Fox and Howard Payne this season. But the 30th, a key date. Region 4, you're going for a team with 2 names, but it's only one team here.
Yeah, Rose-Hulman, man. They have a first-round playoff match up in Week 1, a rematch against DePauw. Both conference champions, and I think this is an Engineers team that had kind of been knocking on. They were struggling to get past the Franklins and the other teams in the Heartland, and they kind of got over the hump. They won the championship last season. They played one of the most competitive first round games I think that we had in the playoffs period. It was I think a 3 or 4 point game. Can't wait to see how that one unfolds and see if they can run it back.
And I'm picking Wabash because Little Giants always fight, and they have not necessarily been fighting to the top of their conference championship over the last couple of seasons, and that's strange. That's unusual. And Liam Thompson the quarterback, is somebody that is on the Manning list for their watch.
It's the only D3 quarterback in the country that's on that list, with guys like Caleb Williams from USC and others.
Well, Thompson here, I think, has a chance to get Wabash back into their normal rarefied air that they are in and win the NCAC and continue maybe into a second round type of game. I think they can do it. Maybe it doesn't start the way, and again, they're not ranked here on our list.
They got to play a little better defense. They've had too many of these 52 to 48 kind of games.
Yes. How many crunch times do we have last season? It's like, okay.
There's another touchdown.
Yeah.
There's another touchdown.
And moving ahead.
to 10 more touchdowns later.
Yes. Yeah, that's been their bugaboo. But I think offensively they can win shootouts, but they don't want to get into one every darn time.
No.
Region 5. The BBs.
That's right. Yeah, Aurora. I mean, what a season they had. I mean, to upset Whitewater on the road in the playoffs. I mean, they do lose a significant amount of that team, but I mean, Coach Beebe's got something dialed in there, and so I'm really curious to see what happens with Aurora and how they kind of reload it. Can they become one of these programs, just like the Whitewaters and the Mount Unions and the Wheatons and the North Centrals, that every year the next guy up comes and they're still playing in national tournament games.
I like the call, but I'm picking Wheaton here. You know what? Eventually, North Central's due for a little bit of a slip up. Here's your John Carroll in waiting, using a Mount Unionism here. And Wheaton might be able to do it. Retooled this year. We'll see where it goes. That game is at Wheaton, as I said earlier, and we'll see. There's a lot more to be said about that game once we get to it. We'll get to it first.
The 21 game between those two was pretty awesome. I mean, it was a close call until probably like the fourth quarter when NCC started to pull away.
The 22 game was the closest regular season game I think that NCC played, actually,
probably,
which isn't saying much. I get it, folks, but we'll see where it goes. Finally, Region 6. Interestingly enough, we picked the same conference here for teams to watch. You picked?
I picked the Titans. Yeah, there's something about this Berghammer guy and his receiving core. I know that they lost 4 games last season, but it was their coach's first year. I have a feeling that there could be some surprises with this Titans squad, so they're definitely a team I've got on my radar.
Okay, I don't hate you for that, but I'm picking River Falls because of who they're bringing back a lot.
Yeah.
And the fact that they played, as I said, their 4 losses within 1 possession last season against teams named St. John's, Whitewater. I mean, this is a team that knows how to win or how to be in close games, and now we'll have to win those close games throughout to really be able to run that table and make it WEAC, dominance.
Wackiness.
Well, that's the interesting thing here. We don't see clearness or clarity in the WEAC.
No.
And so are they going to just knock each other off again so that only one team gets into the playoffs again?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, it's a gauntlet for sure. So
it's a challenge here for sure.
The rest of the country would like that because...
with only 4 Pool C bids, and we'll see what happens here.
Yeah.
But again, without clear-cut dominance in the WEAC, and you got 4 teams basically duking it out every week, and then those other teams can creep up and beat any one of them, it seems like now.
Yep.
This could be interesting. So let's go and look ahead. We'll look ahead to our 4th segment of the show, we'll call this, which is travel and coverage for this season.
You going to go to 22 games again?
I highly doubt that, but we might get a couple right off the bat here in week 1. If Muhlenberg and Moravian would like to move the game from Friday night to Saturday night, we can make it 3, in fact. But
seems reasonable.
So here's what's going to happen. I have options on week 1 on both the Thursday night game. Friday night, I'm going to be catching a high school game up in the Syracuse area. But also on the Saturday afternoon game, I've got options. And so we're going to leave it up to you to help us pick.
I think there's a poll.
There will be 2 polls, in fact, on this one. So
double down. All right.
So here's basically the decisions to make. I could be going out to Buffalo State in week 1 on the Thursday night opener.
Yep.
And they are playing Brockport, hosting Brockport in that game.
Yep.
Or I could go to Rowan hosting Stevenson. That's one set of decisions to make there.
Yeah.
And then on Saturday, you've got Hopkins hosting Ithaca or Cortland hosting Del Val.
Those are like playoff games.
It really are. And again, we are loving these real, let's say, challenge games that these teams are picking here. And we're hoping the committee takes note of these things again this year, because it's necessary. Strength of schedule, you know what you got when you got matchups like those. You don't need numbers to tell you that these are great matchups any year that you play them.
Yep.
And so we'll see what our viewers decide here. Then in week 2, I believe we have a game on a Thursday night that got moved. Was that not Framingham State at Salve Regina, I believe?
That's right. I think it's in Newport.
On a Thursday night?
Yeah.
And
September 7th.
As long as that stays where it is, then I'm going to fly on September 8th to San Antonio, Texas from New York City. I'll be flying, so I can make that swing to New York City that night to get the plane and go down to cover UMHB at Trinity under the lights in San Antonio in week 2. From there...
maybe I'll have to see if I can go to that game.
You should try. You got some coverage there. But anyway... after that, we have no idea where I'm going to be popping up. And this guy may be popping up as well. We want to thank our friends at the Landmark Conference for saying, hey, we'd like to see JB get out more. And so they actually are helping us out with that a little bit this season. So thank you to Katie Bolovich. And we had a lot of fun hosting their media day for their inaugural media.
Yeah, Frank shows up and they're like, hey, you're going to be the MC. What? Okay. You did a great job. At least you wore the tie. You look good.
No kidding. That was completely by happenstance, too. But
well, he's a mayor now, so he's got to,
Yeah, something like that. But anyway, it was a lot of fun. But thanks to the Landmark for thinking of us in that respect. But we will definitely be getting the games. We would have gotten Landmark games anyway this season, so it's not affecting that. But getting you on the road is a little added feature because everybody asks, where's JB? Well, maybe JB finally shows up.
Yeah, we might be able to finally don't have so many kid things to go to on the weekends anymore. So, what
was your favorite coverage I had in 2022 in terms of weekends when I was out and about?
I think from like for some of the photos, the Susquehanna tailgate looked like it was a lot of fun. So it was against Hopkins, right?
That was a day. That was certainly a day.
It looked like that was a lot of fun.
Absolutely, it's right up there for last year. Just even dealing with that game itself, it was such a great game, and what almost happened at the end of that game because of the clock management issue that occurred, and getting to talk to Ryan Stevens after the game a little bit, and seeing their tailgate on the road. Hopkins can travel and travel well for that matter. One of my favorite moments too, though, was Mary Hardin Baylor at Hardin Simmons.
Yeah.
The What Just Happened game, because that was just a crazy, crazy night in Abilene, and my first trip to Abilene for that matter. And Stag Bowl is always a great memory for me, and getting to hand out, essentially without the actual hardware there, the Ghilardi to Ethan Greenfield.
Yeah, that was cool.
It was a special moment, and when I go back and watch on Twitter every so often, because you just don't get that to happen much anymore, the way that things have changed. But the more things change, the more they stay the same. We're back in Salem, Virginia, for Stag Bowl 50, coming up here in December. And then after this year, maybe we don't talk about a December Stag Bowl anymore, because it may be moving to January. That with the possibility of adding a week of playoffs and getting this thing to 40 teams, maybe up to 48 eventually or more. Well, that would be down the line. Let's see how 40 works first. But it gives you that option later on, but also makes bowl games more possible in the first week of the playoffs. Yeah. Because a lot more exposure to week 1 outside of the 8 playoff games that would be played. So we'll see where it goes. But Salem, Virginia, special time for me. In 2007, it was my first Stag Bowl there. This will be my, 15th Stag Bowl on the sidelines? Or 16th. 16, 17. It's my 16th Stag Bowl coming up, I believe, officially.
That's wild.
We'll go back and do the math because of the obvious COVID situation. Yeah. But it'll be good to be back, see a lot of familiar faces like Kerry Harvey Cutter, and J.J. Nekloff, obviously, who we saw last year, but with the ODAC now. Brad Bankston, the commissioner. Teams are going to be really facing off to get back to the road to Salem, which is what we used to call it every year. Yeah. Well, it's back this year, the road to Salem. So we'll see. That's a game you need to get to, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
So we'll see how it goes. But folks, again, over the next couple of weeks, we'll have 3 more shows dedicated to the regions, 1 and 2, then 3 and 4, then 5 and 6, with interviews all along the way. So stay tuned for that. We're glad to be back here. Again, it's season 16, but our 15th anniversary here on In the Huddle from JB's Kitchen in Winter Park, Florida. What do you think? How'd it go?
It feels good to be back. Maybe there's still a little bit of rust on it, but hey, we got another, 30-something episodes to figure it out.
We'll see you next time, folks.